My son and his wife boarded a luxury cruise this morning, leaving me with a thermos of herbal tea and my 10-year-old grandson Leo, who has been mute since birth. As the lock turned, the boy I thought had no voice looked me dead in the eye and spoke with chilling clarity. "Grandpa, do not drink that tea. Mom put something in it. She wants you to sleep forever. My name is Gerald Hawthorne, and 5 hours ago I discovered I was living with my murderers. Before I tell you how a houseplant saved my life, please like and subscribe to hear how I taught them a lesson they will never forget." The morning sun was filtering through the high windows of my living room in Seattle, but it felt cold inside. It was the kind of cold that settles in the bones, not from the weather, but from the atmosphere of a home that had lost its warmth long ago. Bradley, my only son, was pacing by the door, checking his watch every 30 seconds. His anxiety was palpable, a vibrating frequency that usually meant he was hiding something. Next to him stood Vanessa, his wife and my daughter-in-law, adjusting her silk scarf with the precise mechanical movements of a woman who cared more about her appearance than the people around her. They were leaving for a 10-day cruise to the Caribbean, a trip they said they desperately needed to reconnect. I was the convenient solution for their problem, which was Leo. My grandson sat on the rug in the hallway, playing with a wooden block, pushing it back and forth with a rhythmic, hypnotic motion. He did not look up. He never looked up. For 10 years, we believed he was trapped in a silent world, a condition the doctors could not fully explain but labeled as a severe developmental delay. He was the furniture in their lives present, but ignored a burden they carried with a sigh. "Dad, we really appreciate you doing this," Bradley said, but he was looking at his phone, not at me. His voice was thin, lacking the resonance of the man I tried to raise. He was 40 years old, but in that moment he looked like a child trying to sneak a candy bar past a cashier. "We know it is a lot to ask, especially at your age." "I am 68, Bradley, not 90, I replied, leaning on my cane more out of habit than necessity. I was a chemical engineer for 40 years at one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country. My knees might ache when it rains, but my mind is sharper than a scalpel. I can handle my own grandson." Vanessa stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. She held out a stainless steel travel mug, the kind that keeps liquids hot for hours. Her smile was tight, a mask stretched over something I could not quite read. "I made you some special tea, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that felt artificial, like saccharin. "It is that chamomile and valerian root blend you like. I added a little honey and some of my own stress relief herbs. You have been looking so tired lately. I want you to drink this as soon as we leave and take a long nap. Leo will be fine with his iPad." I took the mug. It was heavy, warm to the touch. The steam escaping the lid smelled floral, but underneath the jasmine and honey, there was another scent, faint and metallic, that triggered a memory in the back of my chemist brain. I ignored it, assuming it was just a new brand of tea. "Thank you, Vanessa," I said. "You did not have to do that." "Oh, I insisted," she said, patting my hand. Her skin was cold. "I want you to be relaxed. Promise me you will drink it all. It is good for the heart." "I promise," I said. Bradley grabbed the handles of their 2 massive suitcases. "The Uber is here, let us go." They did not hug Leo. They did not kneel down to tell him they would miss him or that they would bring him a souvenir. Vanessa simply glanced at the boy on the floor and said, "Leo, behave for Grandpa. Do not cause trouble." Leo did not stop pushing the wooden block. He did not blink. "Goodbye, Dad," Bradley shouted from the doorway. "We will call you when we dock." The heavy oak door slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the large house. I heard the lock click and then the sound of the car engine fading down the driveway. Silence descended on the house. It was just me and the boy and the warm mug in my hand. I let out a long sigh, feeling the exhaustion of the morning wash over me. Dealing with Vanessa always drained me. She was a whirlwind of demands and passive-aggressive comments, and Bradley just drifted in her wake, a boat without an anchor. I walked over to the leather armchair in the center of the room, my favorite spot to read. My joints popped as I sat down. The house was too quiet. I looked at the mug. The steam was still rising, curling in the air, like a beckoning finger. A nap did sound good. My chest had been feeling tight lately, a symptom I attributed to the stress of living with them. I unscrewed the lid. The aroma was strong, overpowering. I lifted the cup to my lips. "Grandpa, no." The sound was so unexpected, so impossible, that my brain refused to process it at first. It was a clear, boyish voice ringing out with the precision of a bell. I froze the cup, hovering inches from my mouth. I looked around, thinking perhaps the television was on, or maybe Bradley had come back. But the room was empty, save for Leo. He was standing now. The wooden block was forgotten on the floor. He was looking at me. For 10 years I had looked into his eyes and seen a foggy distance, a wall I could not breach. But now that fog was gone. His eyes were sharp, terrified, and intensely focused. He ran across the room. He did not shamble or drag his feet as he usually did when his parents were watching. He moved with the agility of a normal, healthy 10-year-old. He reached me before I could lower the cup and slapped it out of my hand. The metal mug hit the floor with a deafening clang. The amber liquid splashed across the Persian rug, soaking into the expensive fibers and splattering onto my shoes. "Leo," I gasped, my heart hammering against my ribs. He stood before me, chest heaving, his small hands balled into fists. He looked at the door, then back at me. "Do not drink it, Grandpa," he said again. His voice did not waver. It was not the voice of a child learning to speak. It was the voice of a child who had been listening, observing, and waiting. "You can speak," I whispered, my hands trembling as I reached out to him. "Leo, you can speak." He nodded, tears welling up in his large, dark eyes. "Yes, but you have to listen to me." Mom put something in the tea. I saw her in the bathroom. She crushed the white pills from the orange bottle, the one she hides in her makeup bag. She put the powder in the tea and shook it. She told Dad it would make you sleep and never wake up. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I looked at the puddle of tea on the rug, then at my grandson. My mind, a machine built for logic and analysis, tried to reject the data. My son and his wife trying to kill me. My mute grandson saving my life. It was too much. "Are you sure, Leo?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Maybe it was just medicine. Maybe she wants me to rest. Leo grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "No, Grandpa." She practiced in the mirror. She practiced crying. She said, "Oh, officer, he was so old his heart just gave out." She laughed, Grandpa. She laughed. A coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. It was the chill of absolute horror. I looked at the tea again. The liquid was dark, slightly cloudy. The smell that I had dismissed earlier, that metallic tang, now screamed at me. I am a scientist. I deal in facts, not hysteria. If what Leo said was true, I needed proof. I needed to verify the hypothesis before I could accept the conclusion that my son wanted me dead. "Leo, stay here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do not touch anything." I pushed myself up from the chair. My knees felt weak, but adrenaline was flooding my system, sharpening my senses. I went to the kitchen and retrieved a clean glass dropper and a small plastic vial from my old emergency kit I kept in the pantry. I returned to the living room and carefully collected a sample of the spilled tea from a pooling puddle on the hardwood floor before it soaked into the rug. Then I walked over to the large Boston fern sitting on the pedestal near the window. It was a magnificent plant, lush and vibrant, one I had nurtured for years. "I am sorry, old friend," I whispered. I used the dropper to saturate the soil at the base of the plant with the tea solution. Then I took a single leaf and applied a few drops directly onto its surface. "Now we wait," I said, sitting back down. Leo stood beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder. We watched the plant. In my career, I had tested thousands of compounds. I knew that distinct chemical reactions take time, but toxic agents, high concentrations of cardiac glycosides or synthetic depressants, often have visible effects on biological matter if the dosage is lethal enough. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. 20 minutes. I began to hope Leo was wrong. Maybe he misunderstood. Maybe it was just a sleeping aid. 30 minutes. The tips of the fern fronds where I had applied the drops began to curl. They did not just wilt, they turned a dark, sickly gray. The color drained from them as if life itself was being sucked out by a vacuum. The stems began to droop, not with the slow languor of thirst, but with the sudden collapse of cellular structure. By the 45-minute mark, the entire section of the plant I had watered was dead. It was a black, shriveled mass amidst the green. I stared at the dead plant. The tea was potent. Whatever was in there was not meant to help me sleep. It was meant to stop my heart. If I had drunk that entire mug as Vanessa insisted, I would be dead by now. I looked at Leo. He was trembling. "She did it to Grandma too," he whispered. I turned to him slowly. "What did you say, Grandma Sarah?" he said. "Mom pushed her." I saw it. My wife Sarah had died 6 years ago. It was ruled an accidental fall down the basement stairs. We thought she had slipped carrying laundry. I had mourned her every day since. "I was 4, Leo said, tears streaming down his face. "I was playing on the landing. Mom was arguing with Grandma about money. Grandma said no. Mom pushed her, hard. Grandma fell. Then Mom saw me. She grabbed my face. She hurt me. She said if I ever said a word, if I ever made a sound, Daddy would disappear just like Grandma. She said she would make me disappear too, so I stopped talking. I thought if I was quiet, she would not hurt you or Daddy." I pulled my grandson into my arms, burying my face in his small shoulder. I wept. I wept for my wife who had been murdered in this very house. I wept for my grandson, who had lived in a prison of silence for 6 years, terrified of his own mother. And I wept for my son who had married a monster, and perhaps become one himself. But as the tears dried, a cold, hard rage replaced them. It was a familiar feeling, a professional detachment I used to employ when analyzing a failed experiment to determine the root cause. Only this time the experiment was my life, and the root cause was my family. They thought I was a feeble old man. They thought I was a burden to be disposed of, a bank account to be liquidated. They thought Leo was a broken thing, a mute witness who could never testify. They were wrong. I pulled back and looked at Leo. I wiped the tears from his face with my thumb. "Leo, listen to me carefully," I said, my voice firm and low. "You just saved my life, and now I am going to save yours. We are going to make them pay for everything, but we have to be smart. We have to be actors. Can you do that?" Leo nodded his jaw, setting with a determination that mirrored my own. "I have been acting for 6 years, Grandpa. I am the best actor in the world." "Good," I said, standing up and looking at the black, withered remains of the fern. "Because the show is just beginning." Suddenly, Leo grabbed my hand and pulled me down behind the high back of the armchair. "Grandpa, get down," he hissed. "Why?" "The camera." Leo pointed to the bookshelf across the room. "The teddy bear. The one with the blue ribbon. It has an eye that sees. Mom watches us. She checks if you drink the tea." I peered over the edge of the chair. There on the shelf sat a plush bear that had been a gift from Vanessa last Christmas. Its black plastic eyes glinted in the sunlight. A hidden camera. Of course. She wanted to watch me die. She wanted to make sure the deed was done from the comfort of her first-class cabin. If she sees the spilled tea, if she sees me awake and alert, she will know the plan failed. She will warn Bradley. They might not come back, or worse, they might send someone else to finish the job. I looked at the spilled tea on the rug, then at the empty mug. "Leo," I said, formulating a plan. "Does the camera see the kitchen?" "No, only the living room and the hallway." "Okay. I need you to go to the kitchen and get a rag. We need to clean this up, but we have to do it in a way that looks like I dropped the cup after drinking it." Leo ran to the kitchen. I stayed low out of the camera's line of sight. When he returned, I took the rag and soaked up the remaining liquid. The stain was large, but if I positioned myself correctly, it would look like I dropped the mug as I collapsed. I took the empty mug and placed it on the floor on its side. Then I took a deep breath. "I am going to lie down on the sofa," I told Leo. "I need to look like I am asleep, like I am in a coma. You sit on the floor and play with your blocks. If the phone rings, do not answer it." Leo nodded and sat on the rug, assuming his usual hunched posture, rocking back and forth. The transformation was instant. He went from a vibrant, intelligent boy to the mute, isolated child I had known for years. It broke my heart to see how practiced he was. I lay down on the sofa, positioning my body awkwardly, one arm dangling off the side near the fallen mug. I closed my eyes and let my mouth hang open slightly. I slowed my breathing. We lay there for an hour. The silence of the house was heavy, suffocating. I thought about Bradley. Did he know? Was he an active participant, or just a coward who looked the other way? I remembered 3 months ago when he brought home a stack of legal papers. "Dad, you are getting older," he had said. "Maybe you should sign power of attorney over to me, just in case you start to forget things." I had refused. I told him I was fine. I saw the flash of anger in Vanessa's eyes then. That must have been the moment they decided I had lived too long. They wanted my money. They wanted this house, and they were tired of waiting. The phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the air, making me jump internally, though I kept my body rigid. It rang 4 times. Then the answering machine clicked on. "Hi, Dad. It is Vanessa?" Her voice filled the room, bright and cheery. "Just checking in. We are about to lose signal. Hope you drank your tea and are having a nice nap. Kiss Leo for us." The beep signaled the end of the message. She was checking. She wanted to know if I picked up. If I had answered, she would have known the poison had not worked. By not answering, I was confirming her hope that I was incapacitated. I opened one eye slightly. The red light on the teddy bear blinked once, then went dark. She had logged off. She had seen what she wanted to see. The old man on the couch, the fallen cup, the silent child. She thought she had won. I sat up slowly, my muscles stiff. "Leo, is she gone?" I asked. Leo crept over to the bear and inspected it. "The light is off." I stood up and paced the room. We had bought ourselves some time, but not much. They would be at sea for 10 days, but they would expect a call from the school or the neighbors eventually finding my body. "We need evidence, Leo," I said. "We know what they did, but we need to prove it. We need to find where she keeps the rest of the poison. We need to find the papers." "I know where the papers are," Leo said. "Daddy has a safe in his office. I know the code." "You do, yes." I watch him. "It is your birthday, Grandpa. 041955. A pang of grief hit me. Bradley used my birthday as his code. Was it out of love, or was it just a number to him? "Show me," I said. We walked to Bradley's home office, a room I rarely entered. It was opulent, filled with mahogany furniture and leather chairs bought with money I had given him over the years. Leo walked straight to the painting of a ship on the wall and swung it aside. Behind it was a digital safe. Leo reached up and punched in the numbers. 041955. The lock beeped and the heavy door swung open. I reached inside and pulled out a stack of documents. My hands shook as I leafed through them. There it was, a life insurance policy on my name. The coverage had been increased just last week to $2 million. My signature was at the bottom, but the ink looked too fresh, the loops of the letters slightly off. It was a forgery. Underneath that was a deed transfer for the house already filled out, waiting for a death certificate to be attached, and bank transfer forms aimed at emptying my retirement accounts into an offshore holding company I did not recognize. They had been planning this for months. Every visit, every dinner, every smile had been a calculation. I dug deeper into the safe. At the back there was a small velvet bag. I opened it. Inside were jewelry pieces I recognized instantly. Sarah S. emerald necklace, her diamond engagement ring, items that had supposedly been lost or stolen years ago. "You thief," I hissed. "You stole your mother's jewelry." Leo pulled on my sleeve. "Grandpa, look." He was pointing to the bottom shelf of the safe. There, tucked behind a stack of cash, was a small, clear vial with no label. It contained a white powder. "Is that it?" I asked. Leo nodded. "That is what she put in the tea." I carefully picked up the vial using a tissue to avoid leaving prints. This was it. The murder weapon. Digoxin, perhaps, or arsenic. I would analyze it later. "We have them, Leo," I said, my voice hard. "We have everything we need to send them to prison for the rest of their lives." But just as I was about to close the safe, the landline phone rang again. I froze. It rang and rang. Then the answering machine picked up. But this time, it was not Vanessa. It was a man's voice, rough and impatient. "Hey, Bradley, it is Mick. Look, I know you are on a boat or whatever, but my investors are getting antsy. You said the old man problem would be solved by Tuesday. It is Tuesday. I need my money. If I do not see that payout in my account by the time you dock, I am coming for the kid. Do you hear me? I am taking the kid." The message ended. I looked at Leo. He was pale, his eyes wide with terror. "Who is Mick?" I asked. Leo shook his head. "The bad man. He comes sometimes when you are not here. He yells at Daddy. Daddy cries." I understood then. This was not just greed. This was desperation. Bradley was in debt, deep debt to dangerous people. He had gambled with money he did not have, and when he ran out, he decided to gamble with my life. And he had used his own son as collateral. I closed the safe and locked it. I turned to Leo. "We are not just fighting your parents anymore, Leo. We are fighting a clock, and we are going to win." Suddenly, the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, insistent sound. Leo and I looked at each other. Who could it be? The neighbors worked during the day. The mail had already come. I walked to the window and peered through the blinds. Standing on the porch was a woman I had never seen before. She was wearing scrubs and carrying a large medical bag. She looked impatient, tapping her foot on the welcome mat. "Who is she?" Leo whispered. "I do not know," I said, "but she is not here to sell cookies." The woman rang the bell again, then pounded on the door. "Mr. Hawthorne," she called out. "I know you are in there. Vanessa sent me. Open up. It is time for your checkup." Vanessa sent her. A checkup. I realized with a jolt of fear that the tea was just Plan A. This woman was Plan B. She was the cleaner. She was here to make sure I did not wake up. "Leo, hide in the closet," I whispered. "Do not come out no matter what you hear." I checked my pocket to make sure the vial of powder and the recording device on my phone were secure. Then I adjusted my clothes, messed up my hair to look disoriented, and walked towards the door. I was about to invite the devil into my house, and I prayed that my old chemistry skills were enough to send her back to hell. I sat there on the floor of the living room, the smell of the toxic tea still lingering in the air like a phantom. My knees, which had supported me through decades of laboratory work and corporate battles, finally gave way. I was not collapsing from the poison, but from the sheer weight of the truth that had just crashed down upon me. Leo stood before me, not as the silent shadow I had known for 10 years, but as a witness to a horror I could barely comprehend. The boy I had pitied for his disability was actually a prisoner of his own survival instinct. I looked at his hands, small and trembling slightly, and I realized I did not know my own grandson at all. I had accepted the diagnosis of the doctors, who were likely manipulated by Vanessa. I had accepted the silence because it was convenient. "Tell me," I whispered, my voice cracking under the strain of holding back a scream. "Tell me everything, Leo. Do not leave anything out." Leo took a deep breath. It was the breath of someone preparing to dive into deep freezing water. He sat down across from me, crossing his legs, his eyes never leaving mine. It was a Tuesday. He began, his voice steady, but laced with a pain no child should ever know. It was raining. Grandma was carrying the laundry basket. She always carried the blue one because the white one was too heavy. Mom was at the top of the stairs. She was holding a piece of paper. It was a bank statement. "Grandpa, I know that now because I see the same papers on Daddy's desk when he cries." I closed my eyes, transporting myself back to that day 6 years ago. I had been at a conference in Chicago. I remembered the phone call. Bradley sobbing. The police ruling it a tragic accident. Sarah had slipped, they said. Her socks were slippery on the hardwood. Grandma said no, Leo continued. She told Mom that she would not sign it. She said the money was for my college, not for Daddy's gambling. She said she was going to tell you everything when you got home. A fresh wave of agony washed over me. Sarah had died trying to protect our legacy. She had died trying to protect me from the truth about our son. Mom got very quiet, Leo said. She gets that look, Grandpa. The one where her eyes go flat like a shark's. She stepped forward. Grandma turned around to go down the stairs. She did not see Mom move. Mom put her hands on Grandma's back. She did not just push her grandpa. She shoved her, hard. I could hear the sound in my head. The sickening thud of my wife falling. The silence that followed. "I was playing with my cars on the landing," Leo whispered. I saw Grandma's face as she fell. She looked at me. She looked scared, Grandpa. And then she was at the bottom. Her neck was bent the wrong way. He paused, wiping a tear from his cheek with a furious, angry motion. Mom walked down the stairs slowly. She stepped over Grandma like she was a pile of dirty clothes. She checked Grandma's pulse. Then she smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile she gives when she wins a game of cards. Then she saw me. I shuddered, imagining my 4-year-old grandson witnessing this atrocity. The monster who had killed his grandmother, turning her gaze upon him. She grabbed me by the hair, Leo said, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. She dragged me into the kitchen. She picked up a knife. "The big one you used to carve the turkey." She put the cold metal against my cheek. She told me that Grandma had an accident. She told me that if I ever told anyone what I saw, if I ever made a sound, Daddy would have an accident too. She said she would put Daddy in the ground, next to Grandma, and then she would come for me. The brutality of it made me nauseous. Vanessa had held a knife to her own child's face. She had psychologically shattered him to ensure her own safety. She told me that speaking was dangerous, Leo continued. She said my voice was a weapon that would kill everyone I loved, so I threw the weapon away. I decided that if I never spoke, if I never made a sound, she could not hurt Daddy. I thought I was saving him. For 6 years, this child had carried the burden of a murder on his small shoulders. He had endured the doctor's visits, the tests, the pitying looks from teachers and neighbors, the frustration of his father. He had let us believe he was broken to keep us alive. I looked at myself in the reflection of the dark window, and I saw a failure. I saw a man who prided himself on his intellect, his career, his ability to solve complex chemical equations. Yet I had failed to see the chemical reaction of hatred and greed bubbling under my own roof. I had let Vanessa isolate Leo. I had let her medicate him, treat him like a pet, ignore his education, because I was too busy, too tired, too grieving to look closer. I believed the lie because the truth was too terrible to imagine. I said, my voice thick with regret. I am so sorry, Leo. I failed you. I failed Grandma. Leo shook his head, his expression wise beyond his years. You did not know, Grandpa. She is good at hiding. She wears a mask. When people are watching, she is the perfect mom. She kisses my forehead. She buys me toys. But when the door closes, she pinches me until I bruise. She whispers things in my ear. She tells me I am a burden. She tells me you hate me because I am broken. I reached out and grabbed his hands. They were cold. I chafed them, trying to bring warmth back into his life. I never hated you, I said fiercely. I loved you every second. I just felt helpless. But I am not helpless anymore. And neither are you. Leo looked at our joined hands. I practiced speaking, he admitted. At night, under my covers. I whispered words so I would not forget how to use them. I memorized the dictionary. I listened to you and Daddy talk. I learned everything. I was waiting, Grandpa. Waiting for what? Waiting for her to try again, Leo said, looking up at me with a gaze of steel. I knew she would. She spent all the money Grandma tried to save. Daddy owes bad men a lot of money. I heard him crying in the bathroom. He said they were going to break his legs. Mom told him not to worry. She said the old man problem would be solved soon. The old man problem. That was me. I was the obstacle. I was the piggy bank they needed to smash to pay for their sins. I pulled Leo into a tight embrace. I felt his small frame shaking against mine. He was no longer the stoic, silent statue. He was a terrified boy who had just blown up his entire world to save mine. We held each other there on the floor of the silent house, two survivors in a sea of betrayal. I cried for Sarah, who had died alone and terrified. I cried for the years Leo had lost the childhood that had been stolen from him. But as my tears fell, they washed away the confusion and the shock, leaving behind something harder, something colder. Chemistry is about reactions, cause and effect. Vanessa had introduced a toxic agent into our lives. She thought she was the catalyst that controlled the reaction. But she forgot that some elements, when compressed and heated, do not just dissolve. They explode. I pulled back and looked at Leo. I dried his face with my handkerchief. Listen to me, Leo, I said, my voice steady and low. You are the bravest person I have ever met. You are a soldier. And today you and I are forming an army. An army of two. Leo nodded, sniffing. What do we do, Grandpa? We do exactly what she fears the most, I said. We use our voices. But not yet. Not until we have them trapped. From this moment on, you are my partner. We are going to find every secret she hid. We are going to find every dollar she stole. And we are going to make sure that when she comes back from that cruise, she doesn't come home to a funeral. She comes home to a prison cell. Leo's eyes lit up with a fierce intelligence. I know where she keeps the other papers, he said. Not just the safe. She has a burner phone. She hides it in the vent in the guest room. I saw her using it to call the bad men. My grandson, the spy. The silent observer who had seen everything. Show me, I said, standing up. We are going to dismantle their lives, Leo. Brick by brick, lie by lie. They wanted us dead. They wanted us silent. But they are about to find out that the loudest sound in the world is the truth when it finally breaks free. And as I stood there looking at the small boy who had saved my life, I made a vow to my late wife. I would not let her death be in vain. I would protect this boy with every breath I had left. The mute grandson and the tired old man were gone. In their place stood the avengers of this family, and we had a lot of work to do. I started to rise, my knees cracking, ready to march into the hallway and begin our counterattack. But Leo's small hand clamped onto my wrist with the strength of a vice. He did not pull me into a hug. This time he pulled me down, forcing me into a crouch beside the heavy oak coffee table. His eyes darted around the room with the hyper-awareness of a soldier in enemy territory. "Stop, Grandpa." He hissed, his voice barely audible above the hum of the refrigerator in the next room. "Do not stand up. Do not walk in the middle of the rug." I looked at him confused. The adrenaline of our emotional breakthrough was still coursing through me, making me want to pace, to act, to do something. "Why, Leo?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "We have to move. We have to find the evidence before they call to check on us." "She is watching," Leo said, pointing a trembling finger towards the wall above the fireplace. "Not just the bear, Grandpa. The clock. Look at the number 6. I squinted at the large decorative wall clock that Vanessa had hung up last month. It was a modern piece, brushed steel and minimalist, claiming it was Italian design. I had never liked it, finding it cold and impersonal, but I had never suspected it was a weapon. I focused on the numeral 6 at the bottom of the face. There it was. A tiny, almost invisible glint of glass. A lens. My stomach churned. It was not just a nanny cam and a teddy bear to check on a child. This was surveillance, systematic and pervasive. "She put them everywhere," Leo whispered, pulling me closer until our heads were touching. The clock in the living room, the smoke detector in the hallway, the little black box on top of the kitchen cabinets. She told Dad it was a motion sensor for the alarm, but I saw her looking at the pictures on her tablet. "She can see the whole house, Grandpa. She likes to watch." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I was not just a guest in my son's home. I was a rat in a glass maze. Vanessa had turned this house into a panopticon, a prison where she was the warden and we were the inmates. She wasn't just checking to see if I drank the tea. She was monitoring the aftermath. She wanted to see the convulsions. She wanted to see the fall. She wanted to witness the moment the light left my eyes, so she could time her fake tears perfectly. If I had walked into that hallway, if I had stood up straight and looked healthy, she would have known instantly. The screen on her phone, thousands of miles away on a cruise ship, would have lit up with the image of her failure. And that would be the end of us. She would call someone, maybe Mick the loan shark, maybe another cleaner, or maybe she would just delete the footage and disappear, leaving us to rot. "We are in the blind spot here," Leo murmured, pressing his back against the sofa. "The bear sees the chair. The clock sees the door and the rug. But if we stay low, if we crawl behind the furniture, she cannot see us." I looked at my grandson, this 10-year-old boy who had mapped out the visual fields of a high-tech surveillance system to survive. It was brilliant, and it was heartbreaking. He had lived his life in the margins, in the shadows, dodging the electronic gaze of his mother, just to avoid punishment. "Okay, Leo," I said, my mind racing, shifting from emotional shock to tactical analysis. "I need to think like a scientist. We have variables, we have constraints. If we trigger the sensors or appear on camera acting normal, the experiment fails. We need to maintain the illusion of the hypothesis she has already formed." "What hypothesis?" Grandpa Leo asked, tilting his head. "That I am dead or dying," I replied. I lay back down on the floor, dragging my body until I was partially visible to the clock lens, but only my legs. To anyone watching a grainy feed, it would look like I had collapsed and not moved. "Leo, listen to me," I said, speaking towards the floor, so my lips wouldn't be seen moving clearly. "We have to move through the house to get to the safe. We have to get that evidence. But we cannot walk. We have to crawl. We have to stick to the walls. Can you show me the path?" "Can you show me where the eyes cannot see?" Leo nodded, solemn and serious. "I know the way. I play spies when she is gone. Follow me, Grandpa. Do exactly what I do." He dropped to his belly, moving with an eerie silence, slithering along the baseboards like a shadow. I followed him. At 68 years old, with arthritis in my hips and a cane I usually relied on, I found myself crawling across the floor of my son's house, dragging my dignity and my rage along with me. We bypassed the living room clock by hugging the wall beneath it. We navigated the hallway by timing our movements between the blinking of the red light on the smoke detector, which Leo explained was a motion sensor that only recorded when triggered. "Wait," Leo whispered, stopping abruptly at the threshold of the kitchen. The kitchen was bright, flooded with light. The black box on the cabinet Leo had mentioned was pointed directly at the center island. "She wants to see if you come for water," Leo explained. "If the poison makes you thirsty." I felt a dry rasp in my throat. I was thirsty. Desperately so. But I could not risk it. "We have to go around," I signaled. We shimmied under the dining table, the tablecloth providing a momentary tent of safety. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that pierced our hiding place. It was humiliating. It was degrading. And it was absolutely necessary. As we crawled, I thought about the woman who had installed these cameras. Vanessa. I had always thought she was shallow, perhaps a bit controlling, but I never imagined this level of calculating malice. This wasn't just greed. This was a sickness, a need to control reality, to script the deaths of those around her. She wasn't just a killer, she was a director, and we were supposed to be props. But props do not fight back. Props do not crawl through the dust plotting their revenge. We reached the door to Bradley's study. This was the target. The safe was inside. "Does the study have eyes, Leo?" I asked, wiping sweat from my forehead. Leo hesitated. "I do not think so. Daddy does not let Mom in here much. He locks the door. He cries in here. I don't think she put a camera where she can't watch." It was a gamble, but we had to take it. The door was ajar, just a crack. I pushed it open with my foot, staying low. The room was dark, the heavy curtains drawn. I slithered inside and waited. No red lights, no whirring of lenses adjusting focus. Just the smell of stale scotch and fear. Bradley's sanctuary. "Clear," I whispered. We scrambled up from the floor, dusting off our knees. I looked at Leo, his face smudged with dust, his eyes shining with the thrill of the mission. We had made it through the minefield. Now we just had to defuse the bomb. "Open the safe," Leo, I commanded. "Let us see what other secrets they are hiding from us." And as Leo reached for the painting on the wall to reveal the hidden safe, I glanced back at the open door at the hallway that was watching us. We were invisible for now. But we couldn't stay in the dark forever. Eventually, we would have to step into the light, and when we did, we had to make sure we were the ones holding the weapon. We moved back into the living room with the urgency of soldiers returning to the front line, but we had to move like ghosts. The knowledge of the cameras pressed against my skin like a physical weight. Every step had to be calculated. Every gesture had to be part of the narrative we were selling to the invisible audience thousands of miles away. Leo tugged my hand and pointed to the kitchen. He mouthed the word bag. He was right. I couldn't just pour the tea down the sink. If Vanessa checked the levels or if the camera caught the motion, the game would be over before it started. I went to the pantry and retrieved a heavy-duty freezer bag. I returned to the living room and sat in the leather armchair, my back angled precisely to block the teddy bear's line of sight. To anyone watching the feed, it would look like an old man settling in for his prescribed rest. I unscrewed the lid of the thermos. The steam rose, carrying that sickly sweet floral scent that masked the death within. I brought the cup to my lips, my body shielding the action. Instead of drinking, I poured the amber liquid into the plastic bag hidden inside my cardigan. The heat of the tea burned against my chest, through my shirt, a constant reminder of the betrayal I was carrying. I sealed the bag with a subtle zip and tucked it deep into my pocket. Then I set the empty thermos on the side table with a heavy hand, letting it clatter slightly. Now came the performance. I am a man of science, not the stage, But I knew the symptoms of cardiac arrest and toxic shock better than most doctors. I knew that digitalis, or whatever cocktail she had brewed, didn't kill you instantly, like a bullet. It was a chaotic systemic failure. It started with confusion. I stood up. I let my hand tremble. I rubbed my forehead, as if a sudden migraine had spiked behind my eyes. I took a step towards the hallway, then staggered. I grabbed the back of the chair for support, my knuckles turning white. I wanted Vanessa to see this. I wanted her to see the confusion, the fear, the realization that something was wrong when it was too late to do anything about it. I stumbled toward the center of the rug, directly into the field of view of the wall clock. I clutched my chest. I didn't just place my hand there. I dug my fingers into my shirt, ripping a button loose. I gasped for air, pulling in ragged, heaving breaths. I visualized my heart fluttering missing beats, the blood pressure plummeting. I let my knees buckle, not all at once, but with the jerky resistance of a body fighting to stay upright. I fell. I hit the floor hard. I didn't cushion the fall because a dying man wouldn't. My shoulder took the brunt of the impact, sending a jolt of real pain up my neck, but I used it. I let out a groan that was guttural and raw. I rolled onto my back, my eyes wide and staring up at the ceiling, up at the smoke detector that was recording my demise. I let my limbs twitch once, twice, then go slack. I arranged myself in an unnatural sprawl, one leg twisted the other, straight, one arm flung out, as if reaching for help that wasn't there. I held my breath until my lungs burned, then released it in a shallow, rattling exhale. Then it was Leo's turn. He had been sitting on the floor playing with his blocks, but the moment I hit the ground, he sprang into action. He didn't run to me like a hero. He ran to me like a terrified mute child who had just watched his only protector collapse. He dropped to his knees beside me. He grabbed my shoulders and shook me. His face was a mask of pure terror. He opened his mouth in a silent scream, his eyes filling with tears that seemed to appear on command. He slapped my cheeks lightly, trying to rouse me. He looked up at the teddy bear, then at the clock. He waved his hands in the air, a silent plea for help that he knew would never come. It was a performance of heartbreaking brilliance. He looked small, helpless, and utterly alone. Then he did something that wasn't in the plan, but was perfect. He curled up into a ball on the floor beside me, resting his head on my chest. He lay there, shaking, sobbing silently. To Vanessa, watching from her cabin on the cruise ship, this would be the cherry on top. The old man dead, the useless child traumatized and waiting for social services. It was exactly what she wanted. Now began the hardest part. The wait. Lying on a hardwood floor pretending to be dead is an exercise in mental torture. My arm began to tingle, then go numb. My hip throbbed. The dust formed the rug tickled my nose, and I had to fight the overwhelming urge to sneeze. I had to control my breathing, keeping it so shallow that my chest barely rose. I had to keep my eyes fixed on a single spot on the ceiling, letting them glaze over, resisting the urge to blink even as they began to water. Time lost its meaning. The silence of the house amplified every sound. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like a jet engine. The ticking of the clock on the wall, the very clock that was spying on us, seemed to mock me. Tick, tock, you are dead. I thought about the woman monitoring this feed. Was she watching right now? Was she celebrating? Was she calling Bradley over to show him? Look, honey, it's done. We're rich. The thought made my blood boil, but I forced my heart rate to stay slow. I channeled that rage into a cold, hard stone in the pit of my stomach. Leo didn't move. His breathing was steady against my ribs. I marveled at his discipline. 10 years old, and he had the patience of a sniper. He was my anchor. Every time I wanted to shift my weight, every time I wanted to scratch my nose, I felt his small hand clutching my shirt, and I remembered why I was doing this. We lay there for what felt like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes. The sunbeam that had been hitting my leg moved across the floor. Shadows began to lengthen. Then the phone rang again. It was the landline. It rang 4 times, then the machine picked up. "Hi, Dad. It's Bradley." My son's voice filled the room. It sounded different than Vanessa's earlier call. It was shaky tight. Just calling to check in. Vanessa said she thought she saw you napping. "Call us back when you wake up, okay? Just call us." He hung up. Vanessa had seen. She had checked the feed, seen me prone on the floor, and told Bradley I was napping. It was code. Napping meant dead. Bradley's voice wasn't worried about my health. He was terrified of what they had done. He was waiting for the confirmation that he was now an orphan and a millionaire. I felt a tear leak from the corner of my eye and slide down into my ear. I didn't wipe it. It added to the realism. My son. My little boy whom I had taught to ride a bike, whom I had helped with his math homework, had just called to confirm my execution. I lay there for another 20 minutes, just to be safe. My body was screaming in protest. My lower back was seizing up. But I didn't move until Leo tapped my chest 3 times. That was our signal. I let out a long, groaning breath and sat up. My joints popped loudly in the quiet room. I rubbed my face, trying to bring feeling back into my cheeks. "Is she gone?" I whispered. Leo sat up and wiped his eyes. He looked at the clock, then crawled over to the teddy bear. He peered closely at the plastic eye. "The light is off," he said. She stopped watching. "She thinks you are gone." I nodded slowly. The first phase was complete. We had successfully sold them the lie. Now they would relax. They would order champagne. They would toast to their new fortune. They would let their guard down. And while they were celebrating their victory, we would be dismantling their entire lives. I stood up, wincing as the blood rushed back into my legs. I reached down and helped Leo up. He looked at me, his face streaked with fake tears, but his eyes burning with a very real triumph. "You were amazing, Leo," I said, my voice raspy. "You saved us." "We are not done yet, Grandpa," he said. "We have to be ready for the lady." He was right. The nurse, Brenda, she would be coming soon to confirm the kill, to clean up the mess, and to make sure the scene looked like natural causes. She was the final piece of their puzzle, but she was about to walk into a trap. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a glass of water, drinking it greedily. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me cold and sharp. I checked the time. It was late afternoon. "Leo," I said, "go to the hall closet. Get the duct tape. Get the zip ties from my toolbox." "What are we going to do, Grandpa?" "We are going to welcome our guest," I said, moving towards the front door. "And we are going to make sure she sings like a bird." I adjusted my clothes, making sure I still looked disheveled and sickly. I unlocked the front door just a crack so she could push it open. Then I went back to the sofa and lay down in the exact same position. Leo hid behind the drapes, his phone camera ready. We waited. And 10 minutes later, we heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. The car door slammed. Heavy footsteps approached the porch. The door creaked open. I closed my eyes and waited for the devil to enter. The silence in the house was heavy, a thick blanket that amplified every creak of the floorboards and every beat of my heart. We were lying on the living room rug, Leo and I positioned just out of the visual cone of the wall clock camera. My hip was throbbing, a dull, persistent ache that radiated down my leg, a reminder of my age and the absurdity of the situation. I was 68 years old, a retired chemical engineer with 3 patents to my name, and here I was slithering across the floor of my own son's house like a common thief to avoid being murdered by my daughter-in-law. "We have to move, Leo," I whispered, my lips barely moving. "The study. Now." Leo nodded, his face set in a mask of grim determination that no 10-year-old should ever have to wear. He pointed a small finger toward the hallway. The smoke detector. The red light blinks every 10 seconds. We move when it goes dark. I watched the small LED on the ceiling. Blink, darkness, blink, darkness, go. We scrambled on our bellies, dragging ourselves over the cold hardwood. The distance to Bradley's home office was only 20 feet, but it felt like miles. I could smell the lemon polish Vanessa used on the floors, a scent that now made me nauseous. We bypassed the kitchen entry where the motion sensor sat atop the refrigerator, like a vulture. We hugged the baseboards, our shoulders brushing against the plaster. We reached the heavy oak door of the study. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open with my foot, wincing, as the hinge gave a low groan. We froze. Silence. No alarm. No voice from the ceiling. We slipped inside and I pushed the door closed until it was just a crack, leaving enough space for Leo to peer out. "Watch the hall," I commanded softly. "If you see the red light on the camera turn solid, it means she is logging in. It means she is watching." "I will," Grandpa Leo whispered, taking his position by the jamb, his small body tense as a coiled spring. I turned my attention to the room, Bradley's sanctuary. It smelled of stale cigar smoke and expensive scotch, the scent of a man trying too hard to project success. The room was lined with mahogany bookshelves filled with leather-bound books he had never opened. On the wall hung his diploma from the university tuition I had paid for, framed in gold leaf, and below it sat the massive executive desk polished to a mirror shine. I crawled behind the desk, my knees protesting with sharp stabs of pain. I needed to get up, but the window curtains were open. If I stood up, a neighbor might see me. Or worse, a reflection might be caught by the hallway camera if the door angle was wrong. I stayed low. The safe was hidden behind a landscape painting of a stormy ocean, a cliché that Bradley probably thought was sophisticated. I reached up and swung the frame aside. The digital keypad glowed a soft blue in the dim light. I stared at the numbers. I had no idea what the combination was. Bradley changed his passwords constantly, a habit born of paranoia and guilt. "Leo," I hissed. "The code. Do you know it?" Leo did not turn his head, his eyes glued to the hallway gap. "Yes, Grandpa. It is 081214, August 12th, 2014. I paused, my finger hovering over the keys. That was the day he met Vanessa. Of course. The day his life changed and mine began to end. It was fitting in a sick, twisted way. I punched in the numbers, 081214. The mechanism clicked, a satisfying mechanical sound, followed by a hydraulic hiss as the heavy steel door popped open. I reached inside my hand, trembling not from fear, but from a cold, simmering rage. I pulled out a thick stack of manila envelopes and a black ledger. I laid them on the carpet and began to sift through the paper trail of my son's betrayal. The first document was a quitclaim deed. It was already filled out, transferring the title of my house, the house I had built with my late wife, Sarah, to a shell company called BV Holdings. Bradley and Vanessa. The date of the transfer was dated for tomorrow. They were so confident. They hadn't even waited for my body to cool before carving up my assets. The house was worth $1.5 million in the current market. It was my retirement, my safety net, and my legacy for Leo. They had reduced 40 years of mortgage payments to a single signature, and there it was, my signature. I pulled a pen from my pocket and held it close to the paper, examining the ink flow. It was good, very good. But the pressure points were wrong. The tail of the G in Gerald curved too sharply. It was a forgery, but one practiced 1,000 times. I set the deed aside and picked up a thick policy document. Global Life Assurance, a life insurance policy. I flipped to the coverage page. $2 million. My breath hitched in my throat. $2 million payable upon the death of the insured. Beneficiaries, Bradley and Vanessa Hawthorne. I scanned the fine print, my eyes narrowing. There was a rider added just 3 weeks ago, an accidental death and dismemberment clause that paid out double indemnity if the death occurred due to sudden domestic accidents or unforeseen medical complications arising from home ingestion. Home ingestion. The T. They had tailored the policy to the murder weapon. They weren't just killing me, they were maximizing the profit margin on my corpse. They had turned my death into a business transaction, a lottery ticket they had rigged to win. I looked at the dates. The premiums on this policy were astronomical $3,000 a month. I flipped through the black ledger I had pulled from the safe. It was a record of Bradley's finances. It was a disaster. Red ink bled across every page. Failed investments in cryptocurrency. A restaurant venture that folded in 6 months. And page after page of payments to someone named Mick. The amounts were staggering. $10,000 here, $20,000 there. Interest payments. Bradley wasn't just greedy. He was drowning. He was paying 50% interest on illegal loans. He had borrowed against everything he owned, and when that ran out, he borrowed against my life. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. I had bailed him out so many times. I had paid for his car when he wrecked it. I had paid his rent when he was between jobs. I had never said no, and his gratitude was a cup of poison and a forged signature. Grandpa Leo whispered, his voice tight with alarm. The light. It blinked. I froze. Is it solid? I asked. No. Just a blink. Maybe a glitch. I couldn't take the risk. I grabbed my phone and began snapping high-resolution photos of every document. The deed, the insurance policy, the ledger showing the payments to the loan shark, the forged signatures. I made sure to get the metadata, the timestamps, everything that would stand up in a court of law. I wasn't just an old man anymore. I was a forensic analyst documenting a crime scene. As I photographed the bottom of the safe, something caught my eye. Tucked way in the back behind stacks of $100 bills that were likely the travel money they hadn't taken was a small velvet pouch. I reached for it, my fingers brushing against the cold steel of the safe. I opened the drawstring. Inside lay a gold locket. Sarah's locket. I gasped. This locket had disappeared from my nightstand 2 years ago. I had torn the house apart looking for it. I thought I had lost it in my grief, mislaid it like a senile fool. I had spent nights crying over this piece of metal because it contained the only lock of Sarah's hair I had left. Bradley had helped me look for it. He had patted my back and said, "Dad, you're getting forgetful, it happens." He had stolen it. He had stolen the last piece of his mother as not for money, because it wasn't worth much, but for control. To make me doubt my own mind. To gaslight me into believing I was losing my faculties. It was psychological warfare waged against his own father. I clutched the locket in my fist, the metal biting into my palm. The pain grounded me. It crystallized my resolve. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to strip me of my dignity, my memories, and my sanity before they finally stripped me of my life. I put the locket in my pocket. It was coming with me. I shoved the papers back into the safe, arranging them exactly as I had found them. I couldn't leave a trace. Not yet. They needed to believe they were safe. They needed to believe the old man was dead, and the money was theirs. Grandpa Leo hissed again. Footsteps. Outside. I slammed the safe door shut. Where? I asked. The front porch. Someone is walking up the steps. It wasn't Vanessa watching the camera. It was the cleaner. The visitor. We had to move. We had to get back to our positions. But first I had to get out of this room without being seen. I crawled back to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Leo, go," I whispered. "Back to the living room. Hide behind the drapes. But you, Grandpa, I'll follow. Go. Leo darted away, a silent shadow slipping back into the danger zone of the hallway. I waited 3 seconds. Then I pushed myself across the threshold, my eyes fixed on the smoke detector. Please don't blink, I prayed. Please don't blink. I dragged my body across the floor, the documents burning a hole in my memory, the locket burning a hole in my pocket. I had the evidence. I had the motive. I had the weapon. Now I just had to survive the executioner knocking at my door. We had the motive in the paperwork, but a prosecutor needs more than greed to prove attempted murder. He needs the weapon. The vial in the safe was just a sample, a decanted portion of the poison she used to spike my tea. To nail the coffin shut on Vanessa and Bradley, I needed the source. I needed the prescription bottle Leo had seen her crushing pills from, the one she kept hidden, like a precious jewel in her vanity. We slithered out of the study, leaving the heavy door cracked exactly as we had found it. My joints were on fire, the adrenaline that had fueled my initial burst of energy beginning to curdle into a cold, aching fatigue. But I could not stop. To stop was to die. The master bedroom was at the end of the hall, past the linen closet where the smoke detector with the red eye kept its vigil. Leo squeezed my hand 3 times. That was the signal. We had 10 seconds of darkness between the blinks of the motion sensor. We moved like soldiers in a trench, dragging ourselves over the carpet. I reached the doorframe of the master suite and rolled inside, pressing my back against the wall, just as the hallway light flickered red again. We were safe for the moment. The bedroom smelled of her. That cloying mix of expensive perfume and hairspray that I had always associated with family dinners, but now recognized as the scent of a predator. The room was immaculate, the bed made with military precision, the pillows fluffed. It was a showroom, not a living space. Leo pointed to the ensuite bathroom. "There are no eyes in there, Grandpa," he whispered. "She is afraid of being watched when she is ugly." It was a profound observation from a 10-year-old. Vanessa's vanity was her armor, but it was also her weakness. She needed a space to construct the mask she wore for the world, a space she believed was private. We crawled into the bathroom. The tile floor was cold against my palms. It was a massive room lined with mirrors and marble. On the counter sat a large leather train case, the kind professional makeup artists use. It was unlocked. I pulled myself up using the edge of the counter, wincing as my hip popped. I stood there staring at the rows of lipsticks, powders, and creams. It was an arsenal of beauty products designed to hide flaws. Somewhere in this chaos was the tool she used to stop my heart. Leo stood on the toilet lid to get a better view. The bottom drawer, Grandpa. The one with the false bottom. I saw her put it there. I opened the bottom drawer. It was filled with cotton balls and nail polish remover. I felt around the edges, pressing down on the velvet lining. There was a click, and the bottom panel popped up. My heart hammered against my ribs. Beneath the false floor, nestled in a bed of tissue paper, was an orange prescription bottle. I picked it up. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from the sheer chemical reality of what I was holding. The label was peeled halfway off, but the drug name was clearly visible. Digoxin. Tauv famazamons. I am a chemist. I know digoxin. It is derived from the foxglove plant. In controlled doses, it is a miracle drug for heart failure, regulating the rhythm of the beat. But in the hands of an amateur toxicologist like my daughter-in-law, it is a silent assassin. An overdose disrupts the sodium-potassium pump in the heart cells. It causes nausea, visual disturbances, often described as seeing yellow halos, and finally ventricular fibrillation. The heart simply quivers and stops. To a medical examiner without a reason to look for it, a digoxin overdose in a 68-year-old man looks exactly like a natural heart attack. It was elegant. It was evil. And it was sitting in my hand. I looked at the prescriber's name on the torn label. Dr. P. Hayes, the forger. The man Leo had mentioned earlier, the one who sold fake documents. She hadn't just stolen this, she had sourced it through a criminal network. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, it was a professional hit. I pulled out my smartphone. I didn't just take a picture. I opened a secure, encrypted cloud storage app, one I used to use for storing patent data. I photographed the bottle from every angle, capturing the drug name, the dosage, the partial patient name, which looked like a fake alias, and the serial number. I placed the bottle next to Vanessa's driver's license, which she had foolishly left on the counter, to establish scale and possession. Click. I photographed the false bottom of the makeup case, showing how it was concealed. Click. Then I did something critical. I opened the bottle and poured a single pill into my palm. I took a macro shot of the pill's imprint. White. Round. Scored. Identification confirmed. I put the pill back and closed the bottle. This goes to the cloud, I whispered to Leo, tapping the screen. It is on a server in Switzerland now. Even if she burns this house down, even if she smashes my phone, she cannot delete this. The truth is bulletproof. I watched the upload bar. 20%, 50%, complete. A green checkmark appeared on the screen. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. We have it. Leo, I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket. We have the smoking gun. I placed the bottle back into the hidden compartment and pressed the false bottom down until it clicked. I arranged the cotton balls exactly as they had been. We had to leave no trace. To Vanessa, everything had to appear normal until the handcuffs slapped onto her wrists. As we turned to leave the bathroom, I caught my reflection in the massive vanity mirror. I looked deranged. My hair was wild, my clothes were dusty from crawling. My eyes were wide and bloodshot. I looked like a victim. But as I stared at myself, I saw something else. I saw the set of my jaw. I saw the fire in my eyes. I wasn't just a grandfather anymore. I was a hunter. We need to get back to the living room, I told Leo. The call will be coming soon. She will want to hear my voice one last time. We dropped back to the floor, returning to our undignified crawl. But the weight in my chest was lighter now. I wasn't just carrying fear. I was carrying justice. And it was heavy and cold and ready to be delivered. We navigated the hallway again, dodging the red eye of the smoke detector. We were halfway to the living room when the landline phone began to ring. It wasn't the answering machine this time. It was ringing through. The sound echoed through the empty house, shrill and demanding. That is her! Leo hissed, his eyes widening. She wants you to pick up. We scrambled the last few feet. I threw myself onto the sofa, arranging my limbs in a posture of weakness. I grabbed the cordless handset from the side table. My hand hovered over the talk button. I had to act. I had to sound like a man whose heart was failing, whose brain was fogged by poison. I had to convince the woman who wanted me dead that she had succeeded. I took a deep breath, let it out until my lungs burned, and pressed the button. Hello. I rasped my voice, a broken whisper. And from thousands of miles away came the voice of my executioner, bright and fake. Dad. It is Vanessa. We were just worried. You sounded so tired earlier. How is the tea? The voice that drifted through the receiver was crystal clear, devoid of the static one might expect from a call made from the middle of the ocean. It was bright, bubbly, and utterly soulless. Hi, Dad. It is Vanessa, she chirped. We were just sitting at dinner and I got this terrible feeling. You sounded so tired when we left. I wanted to make sure you drank that tea I made you. Did you drink it? I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. The woman asking me this question was the same woman I had welcomed into my family, the same woman who had eaten at my table for a decade. She was asking if I had committed suicide by her hand. I had to sell the performance of my life. I let my head loll back against the sofa cushion, my eyes half closed, staring at the ceiling fan that was not spinning. Yes, I slurred, dragging the word out until it was a heavy, shapeless sound. I drank it. All of it. Tasted strange. Bitter, good, she said, and I could practically hear the smile stretching across her face. That is just the valerian root, Dad. It is strong, but it works. How are you feeling now? Are you sleepy? I let out a low groan, one that vibrated in my chest. My stomach hurts, Vanessa. I feel dizzy. Everything is yellow. There are lights around the lamp. It was a specific detail. The visual halos, the hallmark of digoxin toxicity. I had taught my students about it for years. By feeding her the exact symptom she was waiting for, I was confirming her success. I was telling her that the poison had reached critical mass in my bloodstream. "Oh, that is normal," she said, her voice dropping an octave into a register of faux comfort that made my skin crawl. "It just means your body is relaxing. It means the stress is leaving you. You are just tired, Gerald. You are so very tired." "I am scared," I whispered. "My heart, it is beating. Too fast. Then, too slow. I think I need a doctor." There was a pause on the line. It lasted only a second, but in that second I heard the mask slip. I heard the sharp intake of breath, the calculation of a predator whose prey is trying to crawl away. "No, Dad," she said sharply. "Do not call a doctor. You know how they are. They will just poke and prod you and charge you thousands of dollars for nothing. You do not want to waste your money, do you? You are on a fixed income, remember." The audacity of it was breathtaking. She was using my own fiscal responsibility, the thrifty nature I had cultivated, to save for my family as a weapon against me. She was telling a dying man not to seek help because it was too expensive, while she sat on a luxury cruise ship paid for with my stolen funds. "Just sleep it off," she continued, her voice softening again, returning to the script. "Lie down on the sofa. Close your eyes. Let the tea do its work. It will all be over soon. You will feel so much better when you wake up. Or I will not wake up at all." That was the subtext. That was the promise. "I can't breathe," I gasped, forcing a wheeze into my voice. "Leo? Where is Leo?" "Do not worry about Leo," she said dismissively. "He is fine. He is playing. He is a quiet boy, Dad. He won't bother you. Just close your eyes. Do it for me. Do it for Bradley. We love you so much. We just want you to have peace. Peace. The peace of the grave. I love you." "Son," I mumbled, letting the phone slip from my fingers. It hit the sofa cushion with a muffled thud. "Dad?" She called out, her voice tinny and distant now. "Dad, are you there?" "Gerald." I did not answer. I let my hand drop to the floor, my fingers uncurling. I slowed my breathing to a shallow rhythm, waiting. "Good night," she whispered, and then the line went dead. I lay there for a long moment, listening to the silence of the house. The performance was over, but the horror of it lingered. I felt dirty. I felt contaminated by her voice, by her cruelty. She had sat there listening to me die, and she had encouraged it. She had guided me toward the darkness with a gentle hand and a heart of ice. I sat up slowly, shaking my head to clear the fog of the act. Leo was staring at me from behind the armchair, his eyes wide and fearful. "Is she gone?" he asked, his voice barely a breath. "She is gone," I said, my own voice sounding strange to my ears, rough and angry. "She thinks I am gone too." I looked at the phone sitting innocently on the cushion. It was a witness to a murder that hadn't happened. It was the final piece of evidence. She had just coached her victim on how to die. "We did it, Leo," I said, standing up, my legs feeling steadier now that the adrenaline of the confrontation was fading into a cold resolve. "We fooled her. She thinks the path is clear. She thinks she has won." But just as I took a step toward the kitchen to get a glass of water to wash the taste of the lie out of my mouth, a sound cut through the silence like a knife. Dong. Dong. The doorbell. I froze. Leo froze. We looked at each other. It was not a neighbor. Neighbors knocked. Delivery drivers left packages. This was a deliberate, insistent ring. 2 notes. A demand for entry. It was her. The cleaner. The woman Leo had seen arriving. The one Vanessa had sent to make sure the job was finished. "She didn't wait for the tea to work," I whispered. "She sent insurance." I looked at the wall clock. The red light was off. Vanessa wasn't watching anymore. She was confident. She had handed the baton to her accomplice. "Get down, Leo," I hissed. "Back to your hiding spot." I scrambled back onto the sofa, arranging my limbs in the chaotic sprawl of a man who had collapsed in agony. I tilted my head back, my mouth open, my eyes staring sightlessly at the wall. The doorbell rang again, longer this time. Then a heavy fist pounded on the wood. "Mr. Hawthorne," a woman's voice called out, muffled by the thick oak door. "It's Brenda, from the agency. Vanessa sent me to check your vitals. Open up." I did not move. I held my breath. I waited for the sound of the key in the lock, because I knew with absolute certainty that Vanessa had given her one. The lock clicked, the doorknob turned, and the door to my home swung open to let the executioner in. The heavy oak door creaked open, revealing the silhouette of a woman framed by the afternoon sun. From my vantage point on the sofa, through the narrow slits of my almost closed eyes, I saw her. She was not the Grim Reaper in a black cloak, but something far more terrifying because of its banality. She wore pastel blue scrubs, the kind you see in every hospital corridor and dental office in America. A stethoscope hung casually around her neck, like a piece of costume jewelry. In her hand, she gripped a large black medical bag, the leather worn at the corners. Leo stood in the doorway, appearing for all the world like the frightened, broken child his parents believed him to be. He had shrunk into himself, his shoulders hunched, his head bowed low. He did not speak. He did not make a sound. He simply trembled, his small hands clutching the hem of his shirt, twisting the fabric in a display of anxious helplessness that was so convincing, it made my heart ache. The woman stepped across the threshold without waiting for an invitation. She was tall, with hair dyed a harsh, unnatural shade of blonde pulled back into a severe ponytail. Her eyes swept the room with a cold, clinical efficiency that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with assessment. She wasn't looking for a patient, she was scanning the perimeter. "Hello there, little man," she said, her voice pitching up into that condescending register adults use when they think a child is simple. "You must be Leo. Your mommy told me about you. She said you are a quiet boy." Leo took a step back, pressing himself against the wall, as if trying to merge with the wallpaper. He pointed a shaking finger toward the living room, where I lay sprawled in my staged collapse. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out, just a dry, silent gasp. It was a masterclass in deception. He was selling her the narrative of the mute, traumatized witness, and she was buying it wholesale. "Good boy," she muttered, brushing past him without a second glance. She dismissed him instantly. To her, he was furniture. He was a non-entity, a piece of debris in the way of her job. That arrogance, that dismissal of my grandson's humanity would be her undoing. I held my breath, my lungs burning. I had to be dead. I had to be a corpse waiting for the coroner. I forced my muscles to go slack, fighting the instinct to tense up, as her heavy footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor, drawing closer and closer. "I am Brenda," she called out to the silent room, her voice booming unnecessarily loud. I am from the insurance company, Mr. Hawthorne. Vanessa sent me. She was worried when you didn't answer the phone. She wanted me to just pop in and check your vitals, make sure everything is ticking along nicely. Lies. All lies. Insurance companies do not send nurses on house calls because a daughter-in-law gets a bad feeling. They send paperwork. They send adjusters. They do not send women with cold eyes and heavy bags to verify the health of a man they just insured for $2 million. She walked into the living room and stopped. I could feel her presence looming over me. I could smell her. Not the sterile scent of a hospital, but the smell of stale cigarette smoke masked by cheap peppermint gum. "Oh dear," she said. Her tone was flat, devoid of surprise or alarm. It was the tone of a plumber looking at a leaky faucet, not a nurse finding a body. "Oh dear, Mr. Hawthorne, it looks like you have had a little accident." She did not rush to my side. She did not call 911. She did not check for a pulse immediately. Instead, I heard the click of the lock on the front door. She had locked us in. She had secured the scene. She walked over to the windows, and I heard the swoosh of the heavy drapes being pulled shut, plunging the room into a twilight gloom. She was controlling the environment, making sure no nosy neighbor walking a dog could peer inside and see what she was about to do. I lay there vulnerable and exposed, listening to the sounds of her preparation. The rustle of her scrubs, the thud of her bag being placed on the coffee table right next to my head, too. The metallic click of a clasp opening. Leo was somewhere behind her in the shadows. I prayed he stayed hidden. I prayed he remembered the plan. If he moved too soon, if he broke character, she would hurt him. I knew it in my bones. This woman was not here to save anyone. She was a closer, a fixer. "Well, Gerald," she whispered, using my first name with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. "Let us see what we have here. Did the tea do the job, or do you need a little push?" She leaned over me. I felt her cold fingers on my neck pressing against the carotid artery. I had practiced this. I was breathing so shallowly it was barely a flutter. My heart rate, thanks to years of meditation and the sheer icy focus of survival, was slow. Weak, she murmured to herself. Thready, but still kicking. Stubborn old goat. She stood up and walked back to her bag. I heard the clinking of glass against metal. It was a sound I knew well from the lab. Ampules, vials, syringes. She wasn't checking my blood pressure. She was preparing a cocktail. "Vanessa really wants to make sure you do not wake up," she said, conversational, as if she were talking to a friend over coffee. "She paid a premium for the house call, Gerald. 50,000. Can you believe that? You must have really pissed her off. $50,000. My son had stolen my money to pay a hitwoman to finish off his own father." The betrayal was absolute. It was a physical weight crushing my chest, making it hard to maintain the illusion of unconsciousness. I heard the sound of liquid being drawn into a syringe, the soft hiss of air being expelled from the needle. "Do not worry," she said, her voice moving closer again. "This won't hurt. It is just a little potassium chloride. Stops the heart instantly. Looks just like a massive coronary. The coroner won't even blink." She was right. Potassium chloride is the third drug used in lethal injections. It causes immediate cardiac arrest. It is untraceable in a standard autopsy unless they are looking for it specifically because potassium levels rise naturally after death. She was a professional. Leo, I thought, screaming the name in my mind. Leo now. I heard a soft scuffing sound near the hallway. Brenda paused. "What was that?" she snapped, spinning around. She looked toward the corner where Leo had been cowering. But the corner was empty. The boy was gone. "Kid," she called out, her voice sharpening. Where did you go? Silence. She scoffed. Hiding. Good, stay there. You do not want to see this. She turned back to me. I felt her hand grab my arm, roughly pinching the skin to find a vein. She didn't bother with an alcohol wipe. She didn't care about infection. Dead men don't get infections. I waited. I waited for the prick of the needle. I waited for the moment when I would have to fight for my life. My muscles coiled, ready to spring. I was 68, but I was fighting for more than my life. I was fighting for my grandson. Brenda sighed. All right, Gerald. Time to say goodbye. I felt the cold tip of the needle touch the skin of my inner elbow. This was it. The point of no return. And then from the darkness of the hallway came a sound. Not a scream, not a cry, but the click of a camera shutter. Brenda froze. She pulled the needle back an inch. She turned her head slowly, looking over her shoulder. And there, standing in the shadows, holding my smartphone with steady hands, was Leo. He wasn't cowering. He wasn't crying. He was recording. And for the first time in her life, the executioner looked afraid. The woman standing over me let out a huff of annoyance, dismissing the shadow she had glimpsed in the hallway as nothing more than a frightened child fleeing from the reality of death. She turned back to me, her focus narrowing to the task at hand. To her, I was already a corpse, a problem to be solved with a plunger and a few milliliters of clear liquid. She did not bother to chase my grandson. In her mind, there would be plenty of time to deal with the mute boy once the old man was permanently erased. She underestimated him just as she underestimated me. She turned her attention to the syringe in her hand, flicking the barrel with a manicured fingernail to dislodge any air bubbles. The sound was a sharp plastic click that echoed in the silent room. I watched her through the veil of my eyelashes. She was calm, professional in the most horrific sense of the word. She was not trembling. She was not sweating. She was simply going to work. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement near the wardrobe that stood against the far wall. The door was cracked open a fraction of an inch. Inside, amidst the darkness of hanging coats and old suits, the small lens of a smartphone camera glinted. Leo had not run away. He had repositioned. He had retreated to the strategic vantage point we had discussed, ensuring he had a clear, unobstructed view of the murder weapon and the murderer's face. He was capturing every second of this recording, the needle recording her face, recording the intent. Brenda leaned in closer, her breath smelling of peppermint and decay. She grabbed my left arm, pulling it straight with a rough efficiency. She didn't bother to be gentle. She didn't bother to find a vein with the care of a healer. She was looking for access, quick and dirty. She ran her thumb over the inside of my elbow, slapping the skin lightly to bring the vessel to the surface. I felt the cold sting of an alcohol wipe. It was a reflex, a habit she couldn't break even when committing a crime. Or perhaps she just didn't want the needle to slip. The smell of isopropyl alcohol filled my nose, sharp and sterile, clashing with the floral stench of the poisonous tea that still stained the rug. "This is it, Gerald," she whispered, her voice devoid of any emotion. "Time to go to sleep. Say hello to the devil for me." I felt the tip of the needle prick my skin. It was a tiny sensation, a mosquito bite that signaled the end of everything. The metal was cold against my flesh. She began to push. "Now!" The command screamed in my brain, overriding the fear, overriding the pain in my joints, overriding the 68 years of wear and tear on my body. My eyes snapped open. I didn't just open them. I widened them, staring directly into her face, locking onto her eyes with a gaze of pure, unadulterated fury. Brenda gasped. It was a wet, choked sound of pure shock. Her eyes bulged. For a microsecond, she froze, her brain unable to process the resurrection occurring beneath her hands. That microsecond was all I needed. My right hand, which had been lying limp at my side, shot up with the speed of a striking cobra. I didn't grab her arm. I grabbed her hand, the one holding the syringe. I wrapped my fingers around her thumb and the barrel of the needle, crushing them together. I twisted. I didn't use strength. I used leverage. I used the mechanics of the human skeleton against her. I rotated her wrist outward, forcing the joint against its natural range of motion. Brenda shrieked a high-pitched sound of agony that shattered the quiet of the house. The syringe slipped from her grip, the plunger depressing, as it fell, spraying a jet of potassium chloride into the air, before the plastic tube clattered harmlessly onto the floorboards. "Who are you?" she screamed, trying to pull away. I didn't let go. I sat up, swinging my legs off the sofa, using the momentum to drive my shoulder into her chest. I wasn't a fighter, but I was a father and a grandfather, defending his pack. I slammed her back against the heavy oak coffee table. She stumbled, her legs hitting the wood, and she went down hard, crashing onto the rug amidst the spilled poison. I was on top of her in an instant. I pressed my forearm against her throat, pinning her to the ground. She thrashed, scratching at my face, her nails digging furrows into my cheek, but I didn't feel it. The adrenaline was a fire in my veins, turning me into something made of iron and stone. Potassium chloride. I snarled into her face, my voice a low rumble of rage. Concentrated. Enough to stop a heart in 30 seconds. Is that what you brought into my house? Is that what you were going to put in my veins? Brenda stared up at me, her face turning red as she struggled for air. Her eyes were wide with terror. She wasn't looking at a helpless old man anymore. She was looking at a monster of her own making. "Get off me!" she choked out, clawing at my arm. "You are crazy." I applied more pressure, just enough to cut off her air for a second, to let her know that her life was now in my hands. "Crazy?" I asked. "Crazy is thinking you can walk into a man's home and kill him without a fight. Crazy is trusting a woman like Vanessa to pay you $50,000 when she is already drowning in debt." "Did you get the money, Brenda? Did you get the cash up front?" Her eyes flickered. Doubt. Fear. She said she would wire it, she wheezed. I laughed, a harsh barking sound. "She lied to you, just like she lied to me. She doesn't have it. She spent it all. You were going to do this for free, Brenda. You were going to go to prison for life for absolutely nothing." I grabbed her other wrist, pinning both her hands above her head. She was younger than me and stronger, but panic makes people weak and anger makes them stupid. I had the clarity of the righteous. "Leo," I shouted without looking away from her face. "Leo, bring me the zip ties!" The closet door banged open. Leo ran into the room holding the bundle of heavy-duty plastic ties I had taken from the garage. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. He looked at the woman on the floor with a cold, impassive stare that sent a chill through me. He handed me the ties, his hands steady. Brenda looked at the boy she had dismissed. The mute, broken child. He helped you," she whispered. "He is smarter than both of you put together," I said. I rolled her over, forcing her face into the rug. I pulled her arms behind her back and cinched the zip ties around her wrists, pulling them tight until the plastic bit into her skin. I did the same to her ankles, binding her legs together. She was trussed up like a turkey, helpless and immobile. I rolled her back over so she was facing the ceiling. She was crying now, sobbing messy tears that streaked her makeup. "Please," she begged. "Please don't call the police. I have kids. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just needed the money." "You didn't mean to hurt me," I repeated, picking up the empty syringe from the floor. "You put a needle in my arm, Brenda. You were 1 second away from stopping my heart. That is not an accident. That is an execution." I held the syringe up to the light, examining the residue inside. "Do you know what potassium chloride does to the human body?" "Brenda," I asked, slipping back into my lecture mode, my voice detached and clinical. It disrupts the electrical signals in the heart. It causes a burning sensation in the veins as it travels. It feels like fire moving through your blood. And then darkness. Is that what you want? No, she sobbed, shaking her head violently. No, please. I leaned in close. I am not going to kill you, Brenda. I am not like you. But I am going to make you an offer. And you are going to take it because the alternative is spending the rest of your life in a concrete box wondering why you trusted a woman who would sell her own soul for a cruise ticket. What? What offer? She stammered. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I stopped the recording I had started before she entered. I held it up, showing her the red waveform on the screen. I have everything I said. Your entrance. Your confession about the $50,000. The needle. And Leo has it on video from the closet. We have you, Brenda. Dead to rights. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. Breaking and entering. You are looking at 25 years minimum. She closed her eyes, tears leaking out. But I continued. I can make this go away. Or at least I can make sure the judge knows you cooperated. I can tell them you were coerced. That you tried to stop it. That you saved me. Her eyes snapped open. How? You are going to make a call, I said, handing her phone, which I had fished out of her pocket. You are going to video call Vanessa. Right now. Why? She asked, suspicious. Because I need her here, I said. I need her to come back. And the only way she comes back is if she thinks I am dead. I unlocked her phone using her Face ID. I found Vanessa's contact. You are going to tell her it is done, I instructed. You are going to tell her the old man is gone. But you are going to tell her there is a problem. A complication. Tell her the police are asking questions. Tell her they want to do an autopsy because the death looks suspicious. Tell her she needs to get back here immediately to sign the papers to stop them from cutting me open. Tell her if she doesn't come back now, they will freeze the assets and she won't get a dime. Brenda looked at me terrified. She will know I am lying. You better be a good actress, I said, my voice hardening. Because if she doesn't buy it, if she doesn't get on a plane tonight, I hand this video to the cops and you go down alone. Do you understand? She nodded, gulping air. I understand. I propped her up against the sofa. I wiped her face with a tissue, cleaning up the snot and tears. Look professional, I said. Look like a killer who just finished a job. I signaled Leo. He stood behind the camera, ready to record her performance, but staying out of the frame. I moved out of sight, standing just behind the phone so I could hear everything. Dial, I whispered. Brenda's trembling finger hovered over the video call button. She took a deep breath, composing her face into a mask of grim seriousness. She pressed the button. The ringback tone echoed in the silent room. Once, twice, 3 times. Then the screen lit up. Vanessa's face appeared, framed by a blue sky and the ocean breeze. She was wearing sunglasses and holding a cocktail. Hey, Brenda, she said, her voice loud over the wind. Is it done? Is he gone? Brenda swallowed hard. She looked into the camera. It is done, Vanessa, she said, her voice steady. He is dead. But we have a problem, a big one. You need to come home. Now. I knelt beside the woman who had come to kill me, holding the plastic syringe up to the light like a specimen in a laboratory. The clear liquid inside looked innocuous, like water or saline, but I knew better. As a chemical engineer, I had spent 40 years understanding the volatility of matter and the fragility of biological systems. I knew exactly what 20 milliliters of concentrated potassium chloride would do to the human heart. Do you know the specific chemical reaction this causes, Brenda? I asked, my voice devoid of anger, replaced by a cold, terrifying curiosity. She shook her head against the rug, her eyes wide and wet with tears. It depresses the electrical conductivity of the cardiac muscle, I explained, twirling the syringe in my fingers. It floods the extracellular space with potassium ions. It destroys the resting membrane potential. In layman's terms, it turns the heart into a stone. It stops instantly. It is painful, Brenda. It feels like fire running through your veins before the lights go out. Is that what you planned for me? A burning death? No, she sobbed, her voice muffled by the carpet. I just wanted it to be quick. She said you were sick. She said you wanted to go. She lied, I snapped, dropping the clinical facade. She wants the money. And you were the discount assassin. I leaned in close, the smell of the spilled tea and her cheap perfume mixing in a nauseating cloud. This is a Class A felony, Brenda. Attempted capital murder. In this state that gets you life without parole. Maybe even the needle. The irony is poetic, don't you think? You trying to kill me with a needle only to end up strapped to a gurney waiting for one yourself? Please, she begged, straining against the zip ties I had cinched around her wrists. I will do anything. Just let me go. I am not letting you go, I said, standing up and towering over her. But I might let you trade a life sentence for a plea deal. If you do exactly what I say. What do you want? She asked, desperate hope flaring in her eyes. I want her, I said, pointing to the ceiling, to the invisible presence of Vanessa watching over our lives. I want the woman who hired you, but I need her here. I need her in this room, and you are going to bring her to me. I pulled out her phone, which I had confiscated. I unlocked it using her Face ID, holding it in front of her tear-stained face. You are going to video call her, I instructed. You are going to tell her that the tea worked, but not fully. You are going to tell her I am in a deep coma, breathing shallowly, but I am lingering. Why, she asked, confused. Why not just say you are dead? Because if I am dead, she stays on the boat and drinks margaritas while the funeral home handles the mess. I replied, my mind racing 3 steps ahead. If I am dead, she feels safe. I need her panicked. I need her to believe that her plan is teetering on the edge of failure. I handed her the phone but kept my grip on it. Tell her the neighbors are asking questions. I continued scripting the lie that would hang her. Tell her a neighbor saw me collapse through the window and wants to call an ambulance. Tell her you managed to stall them, but you cannot hold them off forever. Tell her she needs to get back here tonight to sign the do not resuscitate order, or the paramedics will revive me and talk to the police. Tell her if she doesn't come back to handle the body, the medical examiner is going to demand a full autopsy, because there is no attending physician to sign the death certificate. Brenda nodded, swallowing hard. The fear of prison was a powerful motivator. Okay, she whispered. I can do that. I signaled to Leo, who was watching from the shadows, his phone still recording every second as a fail-safe. He nodded, giving me a thumbs up. I hit the dial button for Vanessa. The screen lit up. The ringing tone purred. Once. Twice. Vanessa's face filled the screen. She was wearing a wide-brimmed hat, the ocean reflecting in her sunglasses. She looked annoyed to be interrupted. This better be good. Brenda, she snapped. I am in the middle of a buffet. Is he gone? Brenda took a shaky breath, summoning the performance of her life. He is not waking up, Vanessa, she said, her voice trembling perfectly. He is in a deep coma. His breathing is very shallow. He will definitely die tonight. Good, Vanessa said, sipping a drink. So what is the problem? Call the funeral home in the morning. The problem is the neighbor, Brenda improvised, looking at me for guidance. The lady next door. She saw him fall. She is pounding on the door, Vanessa. She wants to call 911. She says it looks suspicious. Vanessa's face hardened. She took off her sunglasses. Did you let her in? No, but she is threatening to call the police, Brenda said, her voice rising in panic. She says if family isn't here to take charge, she is calling the authorities. And Vanessa, if the cops come, they are going to see the tea. They are going to see the needle marks. The coroner will do a full autopsy. They will find the potassium. Vanessa went pale beneath her tan. That idiot. You need to come home, Brenda pleaded. You need to be here to show the papers, to show the DNR. If you aren't here to stop them, they are going to revive him and he will talk. Or they will cut him open and find the poison. You have to handle the body, Vanessa. You have to get him cremated immediately or we are both going to jail. There was a long silence on the line. I could see the gears turning in Vanessa's head. She was weighing the cost of the cruise against the risk of life in prison. Greed warred with self-preservation. Fine, she hissed. God damn it. We are docking in Mexico in 2 hours. We will fly back from there. We will be there by tomorrow morning. Hurry, Brenda said. I don't know how long I can keep the neighbor away. Just keep the door locked, Vanessa screamed. Do not let anyone in. If he wakes up, finish it. Do you hear me? The call ended. I took the phone from Brenda's hands. She slumped back against the sofa, exhausted. I did it, she whispered. Is that enough? I looked at the black screen where my daughter-in-law's face had been. She was coming back. The trap was set. It is a start, Brenda, I said, turning away. But the night is long, and we have a lot of staging to do before the guests of honor arrive. I looked at Leo. He was smiling a small, fierce smile. Get the candles, Leo, I said, and find some black clothes. If they want a funeral, let us give them one they will never forget. The 48 hours leading up to their return passed in a blur of cold, calculated preparation. We had transformed the house from a crime scene into a stage set for a tragedy. I had drawn every blind in the house, plunging the rooms into a perpetual twilight. I had unplugged the digital clocks and lowered the thermostat until the air inside was frigid enough to mimic a morgue. It was theater macabre and necessary, designed to unsettle them, to force them off balance the moment they stepped across the threshold. I sat in the darkness of the kitchen, my hand resting on Leo's shoulder. We were hidden from view, but we could see everything thanks to the tablet propped up on the counter. It was streaming the feed from the very security cameras Vanessa had installed to watch me die. Now they were my eyes. Beside me, Leo was dressed in a small black suit I had bought him for Easter years ago. It was tight in the shoulders now, but it added to the visual of the grieving grandson. He wasn't playing with his blocks today. He was watching the screen, his face hard, his eyes devoid of the fear that had haunted him for 6 years. In the living room, illuminated by the single amber bulb of a floor lamp, sat Nolan Pierce. Nolan was my oldest friend and my patent attorney, a man who had made a career out of protecting intellectual property from thieves. He had a face carved from granite and a moral compass that pointed true north. When I had called him 2 nights ago and played him the recordings, he hadn't asked questions. He had simply asked what time to be there. Now he sat in my leather armchair, a black briefcase on his knees, looking like the gatekeeper to the underworld. Headlights swept across the front window, cutting through the gloom. The rumble of a car engine idled in the driveway, then cut off. They are here, Leo whispered. I watched the screen. Bradley and Vanessa stepped out of a luxury rideshare. They were tanned from their 2 days in the Caribbean sun, a grotesque contrast to the somber black clothes they were wearing. They had packed mourning attire for a vacation. The level of premeditation made my stomach turn. Vanessa adjusted a black fascinator on her head, checking her reflection in the car window. She smoothed her dress, took a deep breath, and composed her features into a mask of devastated grief. Bradley looked less composed. He was pale, sweating. Despite the chill, his eyes darting around the neighborhood, as if expecting the police to jump out from the bushes. They walked up the path. I saw Vanessa squeeze Bradley's hand, not in comfort, but in a warning grip. Get ready. The key turned in the lock. The tumblers clicked. The door swung open, and they stepped into the silence of the house. Vanessa immediately launched into her performance. It was a visceral thing, loud and piercing, designed to establish the narrative before anyone could question it. Dad, she cried out, her voice trembling with a vibrato that would have shamed an opera singer. Dad, we are home. Oh God, please tell me he is okay. Brenda. Where is Brenda? She rushed into the living room, throwing her designer handbag onto the floor for dramatic effect. She fell to her knees in the center of the rug, right where I had staged my death 2 days prior. She looked around wildly, expecting to see a body covered in a sheet. Bradley followed her, closing the door and locking it. He always secured the perimeter. He didn't rush. He lingered by the entrance, his eyes scanning the room, not for his father, but for threats. Then they saw him. Nolan Pierce sat motionless in the shadows. He didn't stand up. He didn't offer condolences. He just stared at them over the rim of his reading glasses, his presence a heavy anchor in the room. "Who are you?" Bradley demanded, his voice cracking. "Where is the nurse? Where is my father?" Nolan stood up slowly. He was a tall man, imposing even in his 70s. "Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, his voice deep and gravelly. "I am Nolan Pierce. I am Gerald's attorney. I was called here by the medical examiner to oversee the transition of the estate." The medical examiner. Vanessa gasped, clutching her chest. "Then he is gone. My poor sweet Gerald is gone." She buried her face in Bradley's shoulder, emitting loud, dry sobs. It was a masterclass in deception. But looking closely at the tablet screen, I could see her eyes over Bradley's shoulder. They were wide open, dry, and scanning the room. She was looking for the paperwork. She was looking for the win. Bradley didn't even hug her back. He stepped forward, pushing past his weeping wife, his greed overriding his caution. "If you are the lawyer, then you have the will," he said, his voice eager. "We need to see it immediately. There are arrangements to be made. The house, the accounts. We need to liquidate assets to pay for the funeral. Dad wanted a lavish send-off. We need access to the insurance policy right now." Nolan looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You aren't even going to ask to see the body?" he asked quietly. Bradley blinked. We assume he has been taken away. We want to remember him as he was. Alive. Now about the assets." Nolan placed the briefcase on the coffee table. The click of the latches echoed like gunshots in the quiet room. "I have the documents right here," he said. "Everything is in order. The transfer of the deed, the life insurance claim, the bank authorization." Vanessa stopped crying instantly. She pulled away from Bradley, wiping her dry eyes. She stepped closer to the table, her gaze fixed on the briefcase. $2 million, she whispered almost to herself. "Is the policy clear?" $2 million. "The policy is quite clear," Nolan said, opening the case to reveal a stack of papers. "Double indemnity for accidental death at home. A very lucrative tragedy, Mrs. Hawthorne." They smiled. For a split second, they forgot to act. They forgot the grief. They forgot the dead father. They smiled at each other, a grin of pure, unadulterated avarice. They looked at the papers as if they were a winning lottery ticket. They thought they had pulled off the perfect crime. They thought the darkness of the house was hiding their sins. They didn't know that the darkness was simply the curtain waiting to rise. "Excellent," Bradley said, reaching for the papers. "Let's sign. Let's get this over with." "Not so fast," Nolan said, placing his hand over the documents. "There is one condition. The will stipulates that the estate can only be transferred in the presence of all living heirs." "We are the heirs," Vanessa snapped. "Bradley is his only son." "There is one other," Nolan said, his eyes flicking toward the kitchen door. Vanessa laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Who?" "The mute kid. He can't sign anything. He doesn't even know what day it is." "He knows exactly what day it is, I thought. It is Judgment Day." Nolan smiled, a thin, cold smile. "Actually, Mrs. Hawthorne, the condition isn't about the boy. It is about the deceased." Bradley frowned, confusion clouding his face. "What are you talking about?" "The deceased is dead. Nolan picked up a single sheet of paper and held it out. "Not entirely," he said. And that was my cue. I put my hand on the doorknob. I looked at Leo. He nodded, ready. I turned the handle. The performance began the moment the realization hit them that the lawyer was sitting in my living room, not to arrest them, but to process the estate. Vanessa let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal, a shrill, piercing sound that was designed to shatter the heavy silence of the house. She threw herself onto the rug, clawing at the fibers where I had lain just hours before. "Oh God," she screamed, her voice vibrating with a theatrical tremor that would have been impressive if it weren't so grotesque. "My poor Gerald. My sweet, sweet father-in-law. Tell me it is not true. Tell me he is just sleeping. I cannot breathe, Bradley. I cannot breathe without him." I watched from the darkness of the kitchen, my hand resting on Leo's shoulder. On the small screen of the tablet, I saw her writhe on the floor. It was a spectacle. She was channeling every grieving widow from every bad movie she had ever seen. She looked up at Nolan, tears streaming down her face. Tears she had likely summoned by pinching herself or using the onion trick she had once bragged about using to get out of a speeding ticket. "Where is he?" she demanded, pulling herself up to her knees and grabbing the hem of Nolan's trousers. "Where is the body? I need to see him. I need to say goodbye. I promised him I would be here at the end. Oh God, why did we go on that cruise? I will never forgive myself." Nolan did not flinch. He looked down at her with the impassive gaze of a gargoyle. "The coroner has already transported the remains, Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, his voice flat and devoid of sympathy. It was Mr. Hawthorne's express wish written in his living will that there be no viewing. He wanted to be remembered as he was. Vanessa collapsed again, sobbing into her hands. But between her fingers, I saw her eyes darting. She was checking Bradley. She was signaling him. The grief was the cover, the distraction. She was making the noise so he could make the move. Bradley took the cue. He stepped forward, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. He looked pale, not from sorrow, but from the withdrawal symptoms of his addiction to adrenaline and risk. He looked at his wife on the floor, then turned his attention to the leather briefcase on the coffee table. We are devastated," he said, his voice failing to catch the right emotional pitch. He sounded impatient. "Dad was everything to us. But Vanessa is right. We cannot dwell. Dad was a practical man. He would want us to handle his affairs with dignity and speed." He sat down opposite Nolan, leaning forward, his hands clasping and unclasping nervously. "Mr. Pierce, you said you are handling the estate. Does that mean you have the death certificate?" Nolan raised an eyebrow. "The death certificate is being processed." "Why the urgency, Mr. Hawthorne? Your father has been legally dead for less than 4 hours. Bradley swallowed hard. His eyes flicked to the window, as if he expected Mick the loan shark to be standing there with a baseball bat. "Well, there are expenses," he stammered. "The funeral, the house upkeep. We need to access the accounts to pay for everything. And the house, well, it is a big place. Too big for us to manage. Dad always said he wanted us to sell it if anything happened to him. We have a buyer interested. A cash offer. But we need the certificate to close the deal." I felt a surge of cold fury. He was lying through his teeth. I had never told him to sell the house. I had told him this house was his heritage. He was trying to flip my home before my body was even in the ground to pay off his gambling debts. Vanessa suddenly stopped crying. The switch was instantaneous. 1 second she was a puddle of grief, the next, she was sitting up straight, wiping her face with the back of her hand, her eyes sharp and calculating. She had heard the word sell. "Yes, the house," she said, her voice losing its tremor. "We need to list it immediately. And the insurance. You mentioned the policy. Is it active? Can we file the claim tonight?" Nolan opened a folder. "The policy is active, Mrs. Hawthorne. $2 million, payable upon confirmation of accidental death. Vanessa let out a breath that sounded like a moan of pleasure. She stood up, smoothing her dress. She walked over to Bradley and put a hand on his shoulder. Thank God, she whispered loud enough for the microphone to pick up. We can pay off the cards. We can fix everything. She looked at Nolan, a new confidence in her posture. We need those papers, she said. We need the check. We have suffered enough. Gerald would want us to be taken care of. He knew how hard we worked to look after him. He knew we were his only family. He would not want us to wait for probate. Nolan leaned back, steepling his fingers. It is interesting you say that, Mrs. Hawthorne, he said slowly. Because in my experience, grief usually takes time. People usually ask about the cause of death. They ask if he suffered. They ask about his final words. You have not asked any of those things. You have only asked about the house and the check. Bradley slammed his hand on the table, startling everyone. Do not dare judge us, he snapped, his face turning red. You do not know what we have been through. Dealing with him was a nightmare. He was sick. He was demanding. We sacrificed our lives for that old man. We deserve that money. It is ours by right. The mask had fallen completely. There was no more love, no more respect. Just the raw, ugly entitlement of a son who thought the world owed him a living because he breathed. Vanessa nodded, her eyes hard. He is right. We put up with his senility. We put up with that mute kid. We put up with everything. Now give us the papers. We want to sell the house. We want the insurance. And we want to put that kid in a state home where he belongs so we can finally start our lives. I looked at Leo. He was watching the screen, his face stone. He wasn't hurt by her words. He expected them. Nolan closed the folder. The sound was final. You want to sell the house, he repeated. You want the insurance. And you want to discard your son. Yes, Vanessa hissed. We want what is ours. Nolan smiled. It was a terrifying expression. Well then, he said, reaching into his briefcase again. I suppose we should proceed. But there is a small technicality regarding the death certificate. What technicality? Bradley demanded, standing up. The medical examiner had a question, Nolan said. About the cause of death. You see, the toxicology report came back unusually fast. Vanessa went still. Her face drained of color. Toxicology, she whispered. Why would they do a toxicology screen? It was a heart attack. Nolan looked at her, his eyes boring into hers. Usually, yes. But when a man dies shortly after ingesting a beverage prepared by his daughter-in-law, and when a witness provides a video of a nurse attempting to inject a lethal dose of potassium chloride, the authorities tend to get suspicious. Bradley looked at Vanessa, confusion warring with panic. What nurse? What is he talking about? Vanessa backed away towards the door. He is lying, Bradley. He is trying to trick us. Let us go, we are leaving. Sit down, Nolan commanded, his voice booming. You are not going anywhere, because the technicality I mentioned is quite simple. You cannot inherit from a man who isn't dead. Bradley froze. Vanessa stopped her hand on the doorknob. What did you say? Bradley whispered. I said, Nolan continued, enjoying every syllable, Mr. Hawthorne is not dead. In fact, I believe he is quite thirsty. That was the signal. I reached for the kitchen door handle. My hand was steady. My heart was cold. I looked at Leo. Ready, partner? I asked. Leo nodded. Ready, Grandpa. I turned the knob and pushed the door open, stepping out of the darkness and into the light to face the monsters I had created. The kitchen door swung open on oiled hinges. I stepped from the darkness into the amber glow of the living room. I was not wearing the stained pajamas of a dying invalid. I was wearing my charcoal three-piece suit tailored in Italy 30 years ago, a suit I had saved for special occasions like weddings or board meetings. Today it was for a funeral, but not mine. In my hand I held a crystal goblet filled with a vintage Cabernet Sauvignon, the deep red liquid catching the light like liquid rubies. I walked slowly, deliberately, the cane left behind in the kitchen. I stood tall, my spine straightened by the steel rod of righteous fury. The silence in the room changed texture. It went from the silence of confusion to the silence of the grave. Bradley staggered back, his legs hitting the edge of the sofa. He gasped a sound like a tire losing air. His face, which had been flushed with anger seconds ago, drained of blood, turning the color of wet ash. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out, only a dry, clicking sound in his throat. Vanessa stood frozen, her hand halfway to her mouth. Her eyes were wide, impossibly wide, fixed on me, as if I were a specter risen from the floorboards to drag her down to hell. She took a step back, her high heel catching on the rug, causing her to stumble, but she didn't fall. She just stared, paralyzed by the impossibility of my existence. I stopped in the center of the room. I swirled the wine in my glass, inhaling the bouquet. It smelled of oak and berries, alive and rich. "Hello, son," I said, my voice calm, resonant, filling the space that had been occupied by their lies. "Hello, Vanessa. You look like you have seen a ghost. But I assure you, I am quite flesh and blood." Dad Bradley whispered, his voice a jagged shard of sound. You are dead," Brenda said. "She said you were gone." "Ah, Brenda," I said, taking a slow, deliberate sip of wine. "A charming woman. Not very good at her job, though. She has a terrible bedside manner. And she is remarkably chatty when faced with a 20-year prison sentence." Vanessa let out a whimper, a high-pitched sound of pure terror. No, this is a trick. You are dead." "I saw the text. I saw the report." "You saw what you wanted to see," I corrected her. "You saw a payday. You saw a house to sell. You saw a mute child to discard. You never really saw me, Vanessa. You only saw an obstacle." I took another step closer. The smell of her expensive perfume was sour now, mixed with the sweat of fear. "The tea was delicious, daughter-in-law," I said, locking eyes with her. "A unique blend. Valerian chamomile and a lethal dose of digoxin. Very creative. But a pity, really, because, as you know, I prefer a full-bodied red. It pairs much better with justice." Vanessa flinched as if I had struck her. She looked at the glass in my hand, then back at my face. The realization was dawning on her. The tea hadn't worked. I hadn't drunk it. I had played her. "You knew," she hissed. "You knew the whole time." "I didn't just know," I said. "I watched. I listened. I recorded. Every word, every plan, every vile thing you said about my wife, about my grandson, about me. I heard you plotting to drive me insane. I heard you stealing my money. I heard you deciding that my life was worth less than a cruise ticket." Bradley collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "It's over," he moaned. "It's all over." "Shut up," Vanessa snapped at him, her survival instinct kicking in. She straightened her spine, trying to regain some semblance of control. She pointed a shaking finger at me. This is entrapment. You faked your death. That is illegal, Gerald. You cannot do this. We will sue you. We will tell everyone you are crazy. You have dementia. You imagined all of this. Who is going to believe you? A senile old man against two upstanding citizens. Nolan Pierce cleared his throat from the corner. Actually, Mrs. Hawthorne, the police tend to believe video evidence quite readily, especially when it is corroborated by a confession. Vanessa spun around. What confession? Brenda is a liar. She is a criminal. You cannot prove anything. It is her word against ours. Is it? I asked. I turned back to the kitchen door. "Leo, come out here, please." Vanessa laughed, a shrill, hysterical sound. "Oh, great. The mute. What is he going to do? Charades? Is he going to mime out our crimes?" Leo stepped out of the shadows. He was wearing his black suit, his hair neatly combed. He walked past me and stood directly in front of his parents. He looked at Bradley huddled on the couch. He looked at Vanessa trembling with rage and fear. He stood up straight, his shoulders back, his chin high. He took a deep breath. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Go ahead, Leo. Wave your hands. We don't have time for this." Leo opened his mouth. "Mom," he said, his voice clear, strong, and ringing with the purity of truth. Vanessa stopped breathing. Bradley's head snapped up. They stared at their son as if the furniture had started singing. "Mom," Leo continued. "Ms. Brenda is not a liar. She told the police everything. She told them about the $50,000. She told them about the poison. She showed them the messages on your phone." Vanessa staggered back, clutching her throat. Her eyes were bulging. You can speak." "I have always been able to speak," Leo said, his gaze unblinking. "I stopped because you told me you would kill Daddy if I did. You told me you would hurt him like you hurt Grandma, but you tried to hurt Grandpa, and I couldn't be quiet anymore." He turned to his father. "Daddy," Leo said, his voice softening just a fraction. "Mom pushed Grandma down the stairs. I saw it. And you let her do it. You let her hurt me. You let her try to kill Grandpa. You are not a victim, Daddy. You are a bad man." Bradley let out a sob that sounded like something breaking deep inside his chest. He looked at his hands, then at his wife, then at the son he had ignored for a decade. The weight of his cowardice finally crushed him. He spoke, Vanessa whispered. He spoke. She looked at Leo with a mixture of horror and hatred. The secret she had buried, the threat she had used to silence a 4-year-old boy, had just walked into the room and destroyed her life. "You little brat!" she shrieked, lunging toward him, her hands clawing the air. "You ruin everything!" I stepped in front of Leo, shielding him with my body. I didn't need to touch her. The look in my eyes stopped her dead in her tracks. "Don't you dare!" I growled, my voice dropping to a register of pure menace. "You will never touch him again. You will never hurt anyone in this family again." Vanessa froze, panting. Her face twisted into a mask of ugly desperation. She looked around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a lie that could save her. But there were no exits. The curtains were drawn. The doors were locked. And the truth was standing in front of her, wearing a suit and holding a glass of wine. "There are police cars outside," Nolan said, checking his watch. "They have been waiting for my signal. They have the warrant, Vanessa. Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud. And thanks to your son's testimony, they are reopening the investigation into Sarah's death." Vanessa's knees gave way. She didn't fall gracefully. She crumbled, sliding down to the floor in a heap of black fabric and ruined ambition. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading for the first time. "Gerald, please. We are family. I have a problem. I need help. I can change." I looked down at her. I looked at the woman who had poisoned my tea, who had terrorized my grandson, who had murdered my wife. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a cold, clinical detachment. "You do not need help, Vanessa," I said, taking a final sip of my wine. "You need a lawyer, and a very good one. Because where you are going, the tea is terrible, and the walls are very, very close together." I nodded to Nolan. "Let them in." The front door burst open. Blue and red lights flooded the hallway, cutting through the gloom. Uniformed officers streamed into the house, their voices shouting commands. Bradley didn't fight. He just sat there weeping. Vanessa screamed, kicking and spitting as they hauled her up from the floor. But I didn't watch them. I turned my back on the chaos. I looked at Leo. He was standing tall, watching the justice he had created. I put my hand on his shoulder. "It is over, son," I said. Leo looked up at me, and for the first time in 10 years, he smiled a real smile. "I know, Grandpa," he said. "I know." The chaotic scene erupted instantly as the officers who had been lying in wait burst from the guest room and the kitchen, their weapons drawn and voices booming commands that shattered the tension in the living room. It was a raid, swift and overwhelming, designed to give no quarter to the monsters who had inhabited my home. "Police, get down on the ground," an officer screamed, leveling his service weapon at Bradley. My son let out a pathetic yelp and slid off the sofa, collapsing onto his knees, with his hands raised, trembling like leaves in a storm. He looked at me with eyes wide with betrayal, as if I were the one who had broken the covenant of family, not the man who had tried to sell my house while I was still breathing in it. Vanessa, however, did not go quietly. The realization that her life of luxury was ending, that her schemes had unraveled in the most spectacular fashion, sent her into a feral panic. She lunged not at the police but towards the back door, her heels skidding on the hardwood. "He is lying," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "It is a setup. That old man is senile. He is crazy." 2 officers intercepted her before she made it 3 steps. They grabbed her arms and forced her to the floor. Her face pressed against the rug she had soiled with my poisoned tea. She kicked and spat, screaming obscenities that peeled away the last layers of her sophisticated facade, revealing the ugly rot beneath. Nolan Pierce stood calmly amidst the mayhem, handing a flash drive to the lead detective. "This contains the video evidence obtained by the minor Leo Hawthorne," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "It shows the hired accomplice Brenda attempting to administer a lethal injection. We also have the poisoned tea sample secured in the kitchen and the forged insurance documents retrieved from the safe." The detective nodded grimly. He looked at Brenda, who was still sitting on the floor, bound by my zip ties, weeping silently. She was the first domino to fall, and her testimony would bury them all. I watched as they hauled Vanessa up. Her mascara was running in black streaks down her face, her expensive dress twisted. She locked eyes with me, and for a second, I saw the pure, unadulterated evil that had lived under my roof. "You are dead to me," she hissed as they dragged her past. I looked her dead in the eye, my expression unmoving. "I have been dead for 2 days, Vanessa," I replied coldly. "It was the best sleep I have had in years." Then they grabbed Bradley. He was sobbing now, a broken man, who realized too late that the debt he owed wasn't just money, but his soul. As they marched him out, he turned his head, looking desperately for his son. "Leo," he cried out. "Leo, tell them Daddy didn't mean it." I stepped in front of Leo, blocking Bradley's view. My grandson did not need to see his father begging. He did not need to carry the weight of his father's cowardice anymore. Leo said nothing. He simply watched, his face a mask of calm judgment, as the man who had allowed his mother to be murdered and his son to be silenced was led away in handcuffs. The flashing red and blue lights from the cruisers outside painted the living room in violent strokes, washing away the shadows where we had hidden. It was over. The house was empty of them. The air seemed to rush back into the room, as if the vacuum of their greed had finally been broken. I turned to Leo, who was standing by the window, watching the police cars drive away. He looked up at me, and for the first time in his life, he looked like a child, not a guardian of secrets. "They are gone, Grandpa," he whispered. "Yes, Leo," I said, pulling him into my side. "They are gone. And they are never coming back." 6 months later, the sound of the Pacific Ocean is a constant rhythm, a lullaby that has replaced the ticking of the clock that used to watch us. I sit on the deck of a modest bungalow on the Oregon coast, a mug of hot coffee in my hands. Real coffee. I haven't touched tea since that day. The salt air is crisp and clean. Down on the beach, a dog barks. I look over the railing and see Leo running through the sand, a golden retriever puppy nipping at his heels. He is laughing. The sound carries on the wind, bright and uninhibited, a sound I never thought I would hear. "Leo, come on, Buster!" He shouts, his voice strong and clear. He stops and waves at me, his face flushed with health and happiness. He is enrolled in the local school now. He has friends. He has a voice, and he uses it every day to tell jokes, to ask questions, to read aloud to me in the evenings. The shadows under his eyes are gone, replaced by the light of a childhood reclaimed. We sold the house in the suburbs. I couldn't live there anymore, not with the ghosts of what happened. The money from the sale and the recovered assets from Bradley's accounts, what little was left went into a trust for Leo. I don't need millions to be happy. I need this view. I need this peace. I think about the concept of family as I watch my grandson play. For 40 years, I thought family was obligation. I thought it was suffering in silence to keep the peace. I thought it was forgiving the unforgivable because of shared blood. I was wrong. Family isn't the people who share your DNA. It isn't the people who smile at you across a Thanksgiving table while plotting your demise. Family are the people who stand in the dark with you when the monsters come. Family are the people who break their own silence to save your life. Leo is my family. We are survivors, veterans of a war fought in a living room. And as I watch him throw a stick for his dog, I know that I am richest man in the world, not because of the money in the bank, but because I am alive to hear him call my name. "Grandpa, watch this," he yells. "I am watching Leo," I call back. I am always watching. And for the first time in a long time, I am not watching for danger. I am watching a future that is bright, loud, and beautifully free. This ordeal taught me that blood is merely biology, not destiny. True loyalty is not found in genetic markers, but in shared courage during our darkest hours. For years, I nurtured a son who saw me only as prey, yet found my salvation in a grandson I barely knew. We often ignore the quiet ones, mistaking silence for weakness, but Leo proved that the loudest roar comes from those who have been listening the longest. Never underestimate the ones you protect. They might just be the ones who save you when the world turns cold. If Leo's bravery inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where justice is served cold. Let me know in the comments. Would you have forgiven your son, or did he get exactly what he deserved?